I've got this Makera Air CNC here, but using it involves so many little bits and bobs and thingamabobs that you need, and they take up a lot of space, so I figured a logical thing to do would be to make some drawers to go underneath this desk to keep them handy. And I want to make these out of wood because they're cheaper, they're easy to install, they're not greasy and don't get gummed up with dust, and I can pull the drawer out easily to get at all of it. Now usually metal ones are better because they can handle a lot of weight and they can pull out all the way, but you got this metal thing on here on the side that's greasy. Of course, there's fancier undermount drawer slides that don't have this problem, but instead of taking up width, they actually take up depth on the bottom, and that means you actually lose potentially quite a bit of internal drawer volume on account of the slides. Now, what style of wooden drawer slides to use? There's actually a lot of choices. Now, a simple and very popular style is just these piston type drawers where the drawer just slides in the box that it goes into, and that doesn't take any extra space for the slides, and often they just kind of go into the box like that. Other times the drawer front actually kind of covers the front of the box, which I think is a lot prettier. So these are quite popular for furniture that you can buy, and I've used that style myself for quite a lot of drawers too. Now there's two downsides to this style of drawer. One is that with shrinkage and expansion you have to leave a little bit of room so they don't get stuck. The other thing is I like to make the sides of drawers out of softwood, which doesn't slide the best. So on this one I actually glued a strip of hardwood to the bottom so it has a better sliding surface. Now hardwood makes a very good sliding surface, especially if you wax it or add a little bit of mineral oil. Even better is a metal glide button like this. This came from some used furniture. I don't know where I could get buttons like that, otherwise I'd use them everywhere. But far too often I've seen them where they're made out of softwood and they just slide on the face frame, which is also softwood, especially in kitchens from the 1940s. This is a dresser made by my dad 30 years ago, but fortunately this part is hardwood and this part is a fraction of a millimeter higher than this part, so this takes most of the wear, which means the face frame is kind of undamaged. Now my dad's favorite style used to be just to have a rail protruding into the side of the drawer like this. Now that means that the rail is just the side of the drawer, which means you want this out of hardwood, and you want this to be fairly thick because you want to cut into it without weakening it too much. And I've used that style myself quite a bit too, because for my dad's example, it was just, that's the way it's done. Now if you flip that around and make the drawer have a rail that sticks into the sides of the cabinet, you can make that part out of hardwood, and you can also not make the drawer sides as thick because they don't get weakened. It doesn't look quite as good though. And I've experimented with putting these rails near the bottom, but actually putting them near the top is very useful, especially for drawers that go underneath the desk. Because that way you only need 2 L brackets to guide the drawer. And I've gotten fancy with this approach by adding 2 extra rails near the bottom, because that way I can make a drawer that extends all the way to the back of a standing desk mechanism, and these 2 extra rails support the drawer when it's pulled almost all the way out. And then there's also the wooden center rail approach, which I'm not a fan of because it takes up a lot of vertical space. But there's one style that I've never made, and that's where the plywood bottom of the drawer extends beyond the drawer itself and forms a drawer slide. And sometimes these don't slide super well, especially if they go into a rabbet in a piece of wood, because with that design you can be dragging sideways across the plywood and then across end grain. But I'm going to use that style for one of the drawers here, and you'll see why later. I cut the pieces for my drawers out of various scraps off camera, and then it occurred to me that I could actually cut the joinery for these drawers on my CNC, but then it's like, why would I want to do this to myself? Because my screw advance box joint jig does it just so fast and so accurately. And this bit of video right now is not sped up, and I'm making several cuts for each notch because the blade I'm using doesn't have a flat top, so just by making lots of individual cuts, it kind of flattens the top of that cut. Okay, now I'll just speed up the rest of it. It did take just over 30 seconds to cut the joinery for those 2 pieces. And here's cutting the complementary side pieces, which are offset by 1/4 of an inch so they mesh so that they're flush. And this part of the video is actually sped up by a lot. Now for the drawer handles, I decided to go with recessed handles. The nice thing about those is they don't protrude, which the way I see it is all that space that would otherwise be for the handle sticking out, I can actually make the drawer that much bigger and so have more room inside the drawer, except for the part where the recessed handle is. And I need to cut a big oval for that, which in the past I've done that with my pantry router, but this time I decided to do it with my XY drilling machine. And just to make it more rigid, I took the Jacob's chuck off of it and put the drill directly in the collet. And then using the XY table, I can very precisely position that drill to drill a bunch of holes that are overlapping so that I can cut that oval out like that. Now I need some extra hollow space behind that oval for me to actually grab with the fingers, and for that I figured a cove bit, but it wasn't quite the right shape, so I tilted it by a few degrees. And this operation is a little bit hairy because with the size of that bit and the size of the handle, I have to actually plunge it fully engaged, so having a stop block on the right side and the fence to keep the piece from going out of hand is really important. On this plunge, without the stop block and fence, it probably would have gone out of control. That does still leave some sharp edges for where I actually pull on the handle, so a little bit of work with sandpaper does the final shaping. And now I'm ready to assemble those drawers, and I always put glue on both sides of the box joint because if the fit is very tight, there's too much risk of pushing all the glue out when assembling it, so having both sides coated with glue doesn't make that a problem. Now normally when I assemble boxes with box joints, I just do one corner and then set it aside and work on the next one so that the corner is stiffened up before I add more to it, just so I don't get it out of angle. But on this one I ended up putting glue on the wrong end of the piece of wood, so I was kind of forced to finish the whole box on this one, because if I let that glue dry on that joint without assembling it, it would not be possible to assemble it later. It would just be too tight. But even so, the glue had been open for too long, so I had to go get a clamp to force those joints together. So here's another drawer where I'd already glued one corner and put it aside, and now gluing the second corner, and I'm just picking glue up off the workbench. And with that second joint glued, I put that aside and grabbed the next one, except I realized I should sand some part of this one before I glue it on there. Easier to sand when it's in pieces. And again, just picking up glue off the workbench, it's easier to pick it off the workbench with a splint like that. And so I just squeeze some out onto the workbench and pick it up from there. I often just keep glue in an open container, but I think with this brand of glue it doesn't work that well, so just spill it on the workbench and pick it up. And then with the first two joints fully dried and set, I can focus on gluing the last two joints without having to worry too much about accidentally knocking it out of square. And what happens to the glue on the workbench? Well, it's a melamine top, and so I just use a scraper, which is actually just made from a utility knife, to scrape off any glue remainder. Same thing for varnish. I just varnish on the workbench and then I scrape off the drips. And next it's time to glue on the bottoms. Now this drawer is a little bit weird because it doesn't actually have a back yet, because this drawer is going to have to fit around the mechanism for the standing desk, and I'm going to have to trim the back of it to actually fit around there, but I still want it to be as long as possible so that I can pull it out as far as I can without it actually falling out. And the other drawers are actually much more straightforward than that, just glue it down on all sides. I'm just using glue, although I might add a few nails later because who knows, maybe that glue will crack over time with enough banging around. And 4 drawers glued up. I actually kind of ran out of clamps, so I had to use some of my bigger clamps. These are not just for the standing desk. While I'm making drawers, might as well make a few other ones too. So this is a drawer that doesn't have a back, and the reason for that is I need to figure out how much of that to cut away so that it fits in here and fits around the standing desk's mechanism. So now I know where the back drawer goes, and that does leave rather limited use of depth. When it slides in like that, it can slide all the way back and get around this mechanism, and it's deep like that so that when I pull it out like this, there's still something to hold the drawer by so it doesn't fall down. I turned that standing desk upside down to make it easier to work on the mounts for the drawers. But looking at it this way now, I I could have just mounted the standing desk frame upside down, I would have had plenty of room for the drawers without having to worry about the mechanism. And so now I have a place for all the bits and thingamabobs that go with it. Oh yeah, and the slide on here is the plywood bottom, so that when I cut this part away, I wouldn't be cutting away the slide. Although, it turns out I had plenty of room to have a regular slide right here, like I did on this one, although this one is near the top. And I put the whole thing on a Flexispot standing desk frame, just because I had an extra one kicking around. But it turns out if I'm working on some fiddly stuff, I gotta get close to it, and that's hard on the back. So just to be able to raise it, this one is a slow one, this puts it actually at a much more comfortable working height for small things. And compared to the cost of the CNC, the standing desk frame is actually pretty cheap, so it makes sense to use it this way. And then when I want to put it away again, I'll lower it back down because I don't like it quite this high up on wheels. For the third drawer, I made this kind of funny looking slide, and that is designed to fit exactly underneath the kids' workbench. And a couple of shims to go inside the drawer slides for now, just so I don't mount them too tight. And with the drawer slides now tight up against the drawer, I can just mount them in place. And of course I rock those slides so that they slide very easily. And my final drawer is for my homemade CNC to store the bits and bobs there. Although I don't have nearly as many things to go with that one. And the drawer handle on this one is a slightly different style because the ledge to grab on is actually a thick veneer on the front. And the reason for that is when I put it together, I put this part in backwards and there's no way to fix that. It wasn't coming apart. So I just added the veneer to hide the mistake. So the drawer styles I use the most these days is something like that, glued to the side of a drawer, sometimes extending past the drawer so you can pull it out further, or the ones that just fit in like a piston. And the nice thing with those is if you make the drawer front extend a little bit higher past the drawer, then basically the space that's taken up by the drawer slides is actually still a usable space in the drawer because you can stack it higher than the sides of the drawer. And the CNC is kind of heavy, so I'm glad I didn't have to lift it quite so high.